Hello YouTube, this is your friendly neighborhood Dawson Writer here with my second blog on Power Rangers RPM thoughts and Power Rangers as a whole. Originally I was going to do RPM and Dragon Knight finales, but I have a lot more to say than I thought. Might end up being a two-parter, hope you're not too bored. I hope it's not a two-parter, but let's get started right away. I'm going to go chronologically from when RPM was first announced to the end, and then I'm going to talk about my thoughts on the end of the franchise in general. So to get started, let's talk about RPM. When it first announced, it was very much a surprise. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you know more. The way I understand it is they're going to cancel with Jungle Fury. Something happened. Maybe they paid Toei for Go Onger without knowing it or something, and they had to hire a new producer. So then RPM was born to be the final season. Eddie Guzlan, the new producer, was told that it was the last season, so he could pull shit if he wants or whatever. So RPM was very much a surprise. I didn't go into it with too much hope, because the past few years, Overdrive and Jungle Fury in particular, for me, weren't very good. The pilots were okay, but that's for another time. But anyway, I didn't go in with too much hope, but also I had a little bit of hope because Go Onger wasn't the best Sentai. Just get that out of the way. I don't hate Go Onger, but it was not the best, and definitely not in my top 5. But anyway, let's get on topic here. So RPM, very much a surprise season. So to begin, the pilot episode, outstanding. I love the pilot episode. Probably one of the darkest tones I've seen in Power Rangers in a long time. You can argue and bicker about RPM being dark or not, but I thought it was dark. The first 2 episodes had notably a different tone and a darker tone than very many of the episodes in later, the whole series, especially when Judd Lin took over, but it was a very successful pilot. Many people are mad about the fact that it focused too much on Dylan and Ziggy, but I didn't mind that so much. It kind of gave like an outsider's perspective and a nice change from the typical, well, let's meet our Rangers and then show them get powered up. It was a very different way of doing things. This series was in general. I just really liked the way this series operated a lot. Series operators, Rangers, sorry, anyway, as a reference. I liked the fact that it wasn't so formulaic. I mean, there was obviously the classic stuff of Rangers fight monster, blow them up, get bigger with your Zords, but there was also very different plots and very different ways of going about things, which I really enjoyed. I'm going to go over many of the things in the series, but first I'm going to go over the characters individually, because it'll help me remember how things went chronologically in my head. So let's go over by series operator and number. That's another thing I really liked about this. I like the fact they call them Ranger operators, Ranger Series Red, Gold, whatever. I really like that. It made it feel very military, very professional. Okay, so Ranger Series Red, Scott Truman. When the show first debuted, I didn't care for him so much. I thought he was kind of a dick. Typical Sky, kind of another dick character, Theo type character. I just didn't care for him. After his backstory, he really started growing on me. His backstory was very traditional. There's lots of stories of the second child not being is favored. His big brother is favored. That's very typical stories. The big brother being favored, not being recognized by her father. It's a recurring theme throughout the show. But after that, he really stepped up as a character, and he had quite a few episodes where I really enjoyed him, and by the end, I really liked him as a character, and I felt he was a really great Red Ranger. That being said, I don't have as much to say about him as many of the others, because I felt he didn't have as much things to talk about. So let's move on to Ranger Series Blue, Flynn. One of my favorites of the season. It was a nice surprise that he was Scottish. I remember seeing the trailer and not thinking that he was Scottish. Someone mentioned it, and then after re-listening to it, I realized he was, and that's pretty unique, since they're usually trying to hide accents instead of having them. I really enjoyed his character. I don't write fan fiction, but I always had an idea for a Ranger, and I always particularly made him blue in my head for some reason, that wanted to be a hero all his life, and he finally got the chance, and that's Flynn, and I loved his backstory. He had a lot of funny moments throughout the season, of course the classic line of "I'm Scottish." He just had a lot of really shining moments, and I wish they would have showcased him more throughout the whole series, and maybe even a little more in the end. He had a nice moment at the end where he told Tanaya to basically stop being a bitch and do what she needs to do, but I wish he would have just had a little bit more exposure of being such a unique character. Okay, so Ranger Series Yellow, Summer, Lansdowne, I believe. I forgot Flynn's last name, I'm sorry. Summer was probably one of my favorite female Rangers, just from the fact that her story was so unique. Obviously, if you've watched it in the beginning, you know we didn't know too much about the Core 3 at the very beginning. And then we learned their episodes through their episodes, Ranger Red, Ranger Blue, Ranger Yellow. And I think hers was a 2-parter, if I remember right. And I really loved her backstory. I thought it was really neat the way she was the snooty bitch, and then she turned, and then she just had this turning point when her butler died, and I wish it wasn't so sudden, and the rich family wasn't so stereotypical. We're Lansdowns, we don't help people or whatever. But still, I mean, given the time frame and what they wanted to do, I thought it was a really unique and great backstory that I really loved. I don't really have an opinion on the whole Dylan Summer romance personally. I don't care for it. I mean, I just don't have an opinion on it. And the actress was very good. I forgot to comment. The actors for Flynn and Scott were really good, and she was too. I remember seeing her in some Disney movies or something, so she was familiar. So let's go to Ranger Operator Series Green, Ziggy. Probably one of my favorites as well. Some people say he's overrated, but I thought he was really funny. He delivered some of the funniest lines in Power Rangers, in my opinion, where I actually laughed. I mean, there was many lines throughout all of Power Rangers where I thought it was funny, maybe a few where I laughed, but he had some of the funniest lines, and I absolutely loved his character. He's very quirky. He worked very well with Dylan, had great chemistry with Dylan and with Dr. K. He was just such a great character. I loved the fact that he wanted to get chicks as a Power Ranger, and as much as they could, kind of had mob connections. Bit of a Gambit type character maybe, I don't know, but I thought it was really a great character. And I don't know the actor's names by heart, but he did a really phenomenal job with the character. And I like how I think his name's Dan something of Dylan's actor said that no one else could play Ziggy but him, and I really commend him for that. He's one of my favorites. He just did a really great job. So Ranger Operator Series Black, Dylan, basically the main character of the show, kind of took over the role of Red Ranger, which I agree with people to the extent that they shouldn't focus so much on one character, but I mean, it was good enough that they focus on another Ranger other than Red. Dylan's like your typical badass, basically, and I don't care if like it's bad that you fall for that marketing, but I thought he was a really cool character. His story was also pretty much done before, but he was still really awesome, kind of like a Wolverine android thing going on, but he was very cool. And just a really badass character. His story, like I said, Wolverine, very much Wolverine Andros with losing his sister. I believe, I'll go into this later, but I believe Eddie Guzlin had original different plans for him. But overall, he was a really great character. Really enjoyed his development, his acting. He did a really great job throughout the whole series. Probably one of my favorite Rangers of all time, personally. I just really liked him a lot in that series. I feel like there's something else I want to say about him. But other things will go on later. Okay, so let's move on to Ranger Series. I keep wanting to go up to 6, but there was no Series 6. Carrigator. Let's go to Ranger Series Gold. I'm just going to talk about Gem and Gemma together, actually. Series Gold and Series Silver. Gem and Gemma. Okay, I didn't know what to expect when these two characters came out. I didn't know what Gold and Silver were going to be like. And obviously in Dr. K's background story, we found out what they were going to be like. I didn't like them. I'm still not too keen on them, personally. I don't know why I use the word keen, but whatever. Their personalities are okay. I thought it was kind of funny that they like want to, you know, blow stuff up. Boom time. I like how Dr. K said, Gemma, you're a go for boom time. I liked that. They basically, they grew on me eventually, but I didn't like them at first because the one thing I loved about Go On is the Go On Wings. They were pretty badass. Sure, they had their comedic moments and were watered down sometimes, but they were pretty badass. Like, I've said this many times, RPM plus the Go On Wings would equal win. I mean, seriously, instead of Gem and Gemma. I like the fact that they were in there with Dr. K and were basically in a situation like Ziggy where they had to put on the morpher. But overall, they weren't bad. They were probably my least favorite Rangers of the season, but they weren't bad as a duo, and I give respect to them. So, let's talk about the other characters. Dr. K, who plays the mentor role as the young genius, who was stored away at Alphabet Soup, who created Venjix. She did a really fantastic job. I didn't know what to expect from a younger mentor and what she was like. I really liked her kind of, you know, cold, very, I can't think of the word for it, very, I don't know, I can't think of the word, but her just very, reminded me of the Dr. House in the way that she's very shrewd and she just didn't care what she said to people. I really enjoyed her character a lot, and obviously you had a lot of guilt weighing on her about Venjix, and her whole backstory was really dark and something I'd never seen in Power Rangers before, so I really respect them for coming up with that story. Alright, so the series plot as a whole obviously takes them in the Dome City of Corinth and the post-apocalypse. I'm not going to go into it all, trying to place this in the Power Rangers timeline, maybe for another blog, but I don't really care. I kind of want to see it as standalone or whatever. I don't really care where it is. It was awesome. So let's not talk about that at all. Let's get that out of the way right now. Well, actually, I do kind of want it to be in the timeline, but I'll touch on that later. The story followed the Dome City of Corinth, obviously, with the Rangers fighting Venjix, and there's various attempts to get into the city, as well as another major plot point is Dylan losing his sister, which no surprise ends up being Tanaya, as well as the Venjix virus growing inside of him.